Greetings, and we're here today with the Dean of Hebrew Union College, Jonathan Cohen. Thank you for being with us. How has the institution changed over the course of your almost decade and a half with the organization?
Well, the institution's changed in a number of different ways. I think the institution has gone through something of a transformation, really, over the past 15 or so years since I arrived. I think a number of things really come to mind as salient changes that have taken place in the institution, and I just will run by them.
Mm-hmm.
I think there really are three
Mm-hmm.
that we may want to really focus on. The first way the institution has changed is one that is typically out of the way here, that is out of sight for most people in this country. And that has to do with the growth of the institution and the impact of the institution in Israel.
Mm-hmm.
Over the past 15 years, one might have thought that the Israeli campus of Hebrew Union College, Jewish Institute of Religion, that this Jerusalem campus would remain some kind of a small outpost in Israel that every now and again ordains a handful of Israeli rabbis,
Mm-hmm.
and that really doesn't have much of a presence in Israel and is thought of
Mm-hmm.
as some kind of an American branch of an institution in Jerusalem, in Israel. Well, what has happened has really been transformative. We now have over 70 ordinees who are working in Israel in various congregations in various places. Reform Judaism is in the news in Israel. It now has a following in Israel among secular Israelis and religious Israelis. The number of congregations is growing. There have been a number of legal successes for the Reform movement in Israel. And the impact of it is not just on the Reform movement in Israel, on people who follow the Reform movement in Israel, on the schools, on the daycares, on the other programs that are taking place in Israel, but on Israeli society in general. There is a greater variety of Jewish services that are available to Israelis. There's a greater understanding of Jewish diversity in Israel as a result of the actions that are taking place by the Reform Jews who are leading this charge in Israel. And the hub of this activity is our campus in Jerusalem and the impact of that campus in Jerusalem. And this is perhaps, in an overall global sense, in terms of the impact on the Jewish world that we're making, this is a transformative, this certainly is one of the largest, most significant changes that have taken place over the past 15 years. So the second one really has to do with the integration of the College Institute into one school with multiple programs and multiple sites. What happened, what used to be the case 15 years ago was that really the formation of HUCJIR as a school that exists in Jerusalem and in New York and in Cincinnati and in Los Angeles really looked like a school wherein there were 4 separate schools that were kind of affiliated and led by one central administration. Well, what has happened was, in the meantime, that we have developed electronic program. We have grown our education school. We have grown a whole number of other programs that really are joint program to all the sites. And we have become a much more integrated and technologically savvy school whose reach has really increased as a consequence of this.
Has that posed any challenges or frustrations among those who were used to maybe forming their own kind of ideas of curriculum and organization?
In Jewish organizations like ours, and educational organizations like ours, there are never frustrations such as this. There are never cultural issues such as this. I mean, I'm sure there aren't any in St. Louis. So no, this has of course not been an issue. Now, of course this has been a major change, a very significant change. But the fact that many of our courses are now taught online, we have online and hybrid programs, we have cross-campus programs, we have cross-campus teaching that takes place. Our faculty is much more integrated, our programs are more integrated, our reach is more significant. There's much more of a give and take among various programs and various faculties in a way that's been very enriching as well, has been a very significant change. And yes, there has been a cost to it, and there have been issues and frustrations with it, but there's also been huge value that's been associated with it, and it's really become an element of culture change in our school. And the fact that we're now thinking strategically about reaching out, about raising our profile and increasing our reach in North America, and working together as an integrated school has really been the product of the past 15 years. The third and final has really been the sense of change that has taken place in the overall Jewish community and the Jewish climate in this country. Already just over 10 years ago, with the last population study that was published, that was really worked on between 2002 and 2004, and now the Pew study that's come out and that's been really studied very seriously over the past couple of years. And the sense of responsibility that the College Institute has now been assuming for the survival and the advancement and the growth of a vibrant, liberal Judaism, a learned, vibrant, liberal Judaism across North America, and the way that we make that happen. And I think that has been a very significant change that's taken place since I have arrived over the past 15 years. So if you looked at the College Institute 20 years ago, you would have seen an institution that was confident and that believed that the reform movement was in many ways a vibrant, strong movement that was not really threatened by various trends in Jewish demography and in general demography with regard to liberal religious affiliations in this country that are really cross-denominational, cross-religious in many ways.
Was the Pew study and the demographic studies, were those in some ways liberating to you as a professional, because you could because then you could say to your supporters and those who maybe weren't as closely tied to changes and evolutions, I told you so, this is why we're doing what we're doing?
Well, I think that many of the professionals in the movement, in the reform movement, in the conservative movement, in other movements, in other liberal denominations across the country, Christian denominations and in a number of others, knew what was going on really since the late 1980s, the mid to late 1980s and early 1990s. People were aware of what's going on, but the popular awareness of this, the widespread awareness of this, the awareness among lay congregants and lay leaderships across the country, our ability to talk about this, our ability to really put this on the table and to create a strategy to address this has not been there. And that has changed over the past 15 years. If I had to point to the most significant change that has taken place in North America over the past 15 years, I think that's been the most significant change. And I think the College Institute has played a very significant role in it, with a number of leading people who have been associated with these studies and now formulating the response to these studies.
The four campuses, I'm sure, produce numerous ordained rabbis each year. Are the number of available synagogue pulpits for these, for those interested in being synagogue rabbis, keeping pace, or do we have a glut of highly qualified rabbis for whom there is no pulpit opportunity?
We are now experiencing a shortage of rabbis.
Really?
Yes, we're now experiencing a shortage of rabbis. We need more candidates for the rabbinate. We need more people to come into the rabbinate. What we're now experiencing is something that is being experienced in the Jewish not-for-profit sector and in other aspects of the not-for-profit sector across this country, and that is the retirement of the baby boom generation. And that baby boom generation's retirement means that people in senior positions in the running of not-for-profit organizations are stepping away, and the people who are coming to replace them are people who are going to need to step up to fill these positions. And what we're projecting over the next 5 to 10 years especially is a need for these professionals to step up, right? So that is something that's taking place, and it's taking place in our congregations as well as in other not-for-profit organizations across the Jewish world, and we're very much aware of it, and this is a real issue. And I can tell you that right now, were it not for certain baby boomers returning to the workforce, we would face a real shortage in our Reform congregations. And I just, so I want to answer that question directly. This is not a case of our now experiencing a glut in rabbis and wondering what is going to happen, how is this going to work out for us. We need rabbis, we need rabbinical students, we need people to come in, and we are working very hard at recruiting rabbis to really ensure the future of our, the vibrancy and future of our Jewish community.
You mentioned the rabbinical candidates, and what I'm curious about is the kind of the constituent components of rabbinical candidates these days? I mean, have you seen kind of an evolution or a shift in the backgrounds and the types of candidates you're seeing over the last 15 years?
So we're studying this, and it's a very difficult question to answer. The data is a little bit difficult for us to really analyze and assess and come to very firm conclusions on, but I'm going to give you a very brief description of what it is that we're finding. We have known for a really long time that that our candidates, since we have become, I'm going to step back for a moment, forgive me, I'm going to step back for a moment and answer the question in a historical perspective that's a little bit wider. We became a co-ed institution, an institution that accepted both male and female candidates for the rabbinate, for the cantorate, and for our leadership programs just over 40 years ago.
I can remember when that Sally Priesand.
Right. So Sally Priesand, 1972, the ordination of Sally Priesand in 72, and of course 73, her arrival as a pulpit rabbi. So we're talking just over 40 years ago. This is really what happened. Really, over a 10 to 15 year period, the number of female students was relatively limited. It was relatively small. The number of women entering these roles was relatively small. So the first thing that happened over the past generation, the past 30 years or so, has been a very significant increase in the number of women who are entering the rabbinate. Mm-hmm. We now have roughly 50%, just over 50% of our students to the rabbinate who are women. Mm-hmm. And the number fluctuates from year to year. There are classes where that are more male-orientated, other classes that are more female-orientated. But overall, the number of women entering into the rabbinical career, into the rabbinate, has really grown very significantly. That's been one major change that's taken place. And I think we've all seen that change, and we have seen women assume senior rabbinic mm-hmm. positions now, become the leaders of various organizations, including a woman who has become the head of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, mm-hmm. very prominent national organizations. That's been one very significant change. We have also seen over the years that the number of second career students that have come into the school has increased. So what used to be the case was that historically, going back now generations, our students would typically be students who would come in and express an interest in the rabbinate as seniors in high school, sometimes as young undergraduates, and who would really form a career that would be a career that would really be formed as undergraduate students going into the graduate program of the Hebrew Union College and come in through that kind of program, through the College Institute, to become rabbis. And this was the bulk of our students. Mm-hmm. Typically, the students who would come to HUC-JIR generations ago, really up to the last 30 years, in the last generation, were typically students who came to us with an undergraduate background. And there were students who were second career students who were coming in, mm-hmm. starting in the late 60s and 70s, and their numbers have been growing. And we now have a much larger number of second career students who are coming into the school. Now, these students may be in their late 20s or early 30s. They sometimes can be students who had entire careers and who are coming to us later in life, a little bit later in life, to become rabbis. Mm-hmm. So we are having both students who are coming in following an undergraduate education, because we are a graduate institution, mm-hmm. and students who are coming to us as second career students. So we have a diversity of students, mm-hmm. not only a gender diversity of students, but we also have a diversity of students in terms of ages, professional backgrounds, where it is that they come from, and who are the students who are coming in. There are a number of really interesting aspects of those students that are really kind of recognizable hallmarks of our students. There is a very strong affiliation with Jewish organizational life mm-hmm. among the students who come to us, especially summer camps. Mm-hmm. Okay? Youth movements and summer camps are very important.
That's not surprising.
And it's not surprising in getting people to come and to dedicate their lives to Jewish leadership and, mm-hmm. the rabbinate. That's mm-hmm. number one. Number two, there's a huge number of our students, the vast majority of our students, and this is the single most important hallmark of our students, have been touched by rabbis. Mm-hmm. Have not only belonged to congregations, but were touched by rabbis, either in the context of life cycle events and life cycle issues, or in the context of education, or in the context of their summer camps. Mm-hmm. So there's rabbinic modeling mm-hmm. that's taken place that's really enabled them to think of themselves as people who are going to fulfill the role that a rabbi has fulfilled in their lives. The picture that emerges, and the answer to your question on one foot, standing on one foot, if I had to summarize my response to your question, the student body has diversified. It is now very diverse. It is diverse in terms of gender, it is diverse in terms of the way the students come to us, it is diverse in terms of the careers, the backgrounds of our students and their formations, and it is diverse in terms of the age groups that are represented in the student body. So it has diversified. At the same time, there are certain hallmarks that we continue to see among our students. Organizational affiliation and rabbinic role modeling that has led students, and rabbinic touch that has led to our students to the school.
We just saw here in St. Louis, which of course transmogrified throughout the world, the events in Ferguson and elsewhere.
Yes.
Does social activism and social justice play a role in many candidates' decision to enter the rabbinate?
There has been and there remains a very significant number of people who come to us and who come to the rabbinate with a view to changing the world, to making the world a better place. There was a period wherein this was extraordinarily prominent in the late 1960s and 70s, and where this was really one of the hallmarks of our movement, wherein leaders of our movement were associated with the civil rights movement, with a whole number of other social movements in this country that had to do with gender equality and that had to do with integration into this country. You remember the Soviet Jewry movement?
Yes.
That was in many ways led by reform rabbis and reform activists. So this has been very important to us. You must be aware of the fact that there are now an increasingly large number of rabbis who are very, very concerned, not only about issues that relate to international affairs and the Middle East and the Israeli-Arab issue, but who are very much concerned with the environment and with the changes that are taking place in the environment, with income inequality, with race relations, with a whole number of other social justice issues, and this remains a focus of our activities. I don't know if you're aware of it, there's no reason for you to necessarily be aware of it. The college campus in Cincinnati, under our administration, just recently within the last 3 years, we have opened a social service agency on the campus of the College Institute in Cincinnati. And so we have a counseling center and a food pantry on the campus. We have launched an organic garden on the campus that is now quadrupling this year. We have launched a whole project that is associated with serving the needs of the poor and dealing with the issues of poverty, as well as racial issues that are associated with poverty on our campus in Cincinnati. This remains an area of focus. We have reached out to clergy from other denominations to help us and to work with us, because there's a number of organizations that we tap into in this regard. These issues remain core to our identity. They have been core to our identity. And I don't know whether you're aware of this. The Reform movement was founded as a movement in the 1860s and 1870s, as a movement that was really addressing these kinds of issues from the very beginning.
Right.
So the issues of slavery, the issues of race issues. The College Institute has a record in Cincinnati of working for integration in the 1950s and 60s. Rabbinical students at the college in Cincinnati were working for integration already at that time. This is really part of our root system and not only our contemporary identity.